here in the 23rd official distillery of Ireland, and we're here not far from the Mourne Mountains in Killowen Distillery, and we have Brendan Carty, owner, founder, distiller, everything to do with the Killowen Distillery, and we're just going to have a quick tour. He's going to take us around the micro distillery and show us some of the features and talk about what he's trying to achieve as a small craft distillery, micro distillery. So Brendan, thank you very much for having us.
Man, no, you're more than welcome. Thanks for coming up. So this is Killowen Distillery. Very welcome. And I suppose we're just going to start, do a brief run through the process. Our distillery floor just happens to be one room, which is about 4.5 metres by 10 metres. So it's tiny, and but we do what we can with the space, and that's the distillery floor itself. So this is our hot water tank. This is the start of the process. We need hot water, so we actually get our hot water, it's recycled. So our water initially is coming from our condensers at about 50 degrees, and then the water comes up in here. We heat it up to about, we actually heat ours, our striking temperature is a little bit higher, so 70 to 80 degrees. And then we get our mash. So mash bills are very important to us as well. So we have oats, rye, wheat, malted barley and unmalted barley. And all of these come in at their own unique percentages. So they come into this, our roller mill here, and breaks down the grain and moves its way up and falls down into our mash tun. Now, recycling is a very important part of Killowen Distillery, and our mash tun, as you can see, is a recycled dairy tank. And that's a key theme right throughout the distillery, is trying to upcycle and be as environmentally conscious as possible. And in here we don't have any equipment, so we stir everything by hand. All of our malted and our unmalted ingredients in here with the hot water. So that hot water reaches its way into the malt and rips those sugars out of it. But the unmalted grains, they don't have any sugars, they just have starches. So we're relying on the enzymes that are in the malted barley to go in there and try and convert those starches into the sugars. And that's a very important part of the single pot still process. So traditional mash bills are very important to us.
And, so just explain what a mash bill is. What is a mash bill?
A mash bill is something that was celebrated in Ireland for a very long time. Whenever Irish whiskey was the whiskey of choice throughout the world. This is before basically the more recent fabrication, if you like, of single malt. Now, single malt is a fantastic thing, there's no doubt about it. But before, it was very well known throughout America and throughout the whole of the British Empire. There was pot still whiskey that was the whiskey of choice. And not pot still whiskey as we know it today, but pot still whiskey that had much more oats, and in particular much more unmalted barley as well, with a little bit of rye and sometimes wheat in there as well. And there's a lot of research being done today into these old mash bills, and sometimes mash bills happened because of particular tastes in particular areas, and sometimes it happened because it's whatever was available to the distillers at the time. And we've got our own mash bills for our own reasons.
So a mash bill is a recipe and a blend of different types of grains that go into this kettle, basically, where you basically extract the sugared water from the grains.
Mash tun, yeah, that's right.
Okay.
And so then whenever we take off our wort, we add yeast to it, and then a few days later, it takes at least 3 days. Sometimes it can take up to a week. Our wort turns into a beer, a really strong ale that's about 8 or 9%, sometimes 10%. Just the way we work it. Now we don't have.
What yeast do you use?
We use a standard distiller's yeast, which is we're very happy with. But what makes our fermentation process unique is that before we pitch our yeast, we leave it open to the elements outside. So we basically take our mash tun out, our fermenters outside, and we let the native lactobacillus find its way into the fermenter and basically infect it. So you'll notice once our beer is created, it tastes like a proper sour, so you're getting it in your cheeks straight away. It's very astringent as well, so you're getting a lot of pineapples and things like that. Basically a bacterial infection, and it creates a lot of, it works out really well. And later on, we get a lot more esters in our spirit. So we've tried to, whenever we make it much more sterile, we lose a lot of complexity and flavour later on. So it's very important that we keep that. So our whiskey is actually of its place, which is very important to us. We've got this beautiful mountainous semi-maritime environment, and so that Highland whiskey as well, of this area. So it's something we're very proud of and want to keep going. So then we take our, sorry there's a bit of background noise because our low wines and our tails are coming off at the same time. So basically we get our beer and we put it, or our wash, we put it into our pot still. So this is a 1,000 litre pot still. And the pot still, as you can see, it's got a brick base around it, and that's because we've got open flame underneath it. So under here we've got gas-fired burners burning away at the base of the still, and inside's our beer. So what's happening at the bottom of the still is that the proteins and the sugars are burning together, and they're caramelizing. They're caramelizing at the base of the still, and it's what's known as the Maillard reaction, and it creates. As humans, we've evolved to enjoy cooked foods, and for example, we like barbecues, we like creme brulee, those sorts of flavours. So these flavours are then carried through in our distillate. So we're very distillate led, and that's why we've chosen our stills in such a way. These are handmade copper alembics from Portugal, but another way in which they're unique is that they've actually got a tall neck. So the only place in the world with these tall necks instead of the standard stumpy neck that you would get on an alembic. And whenever you heat it up, alcohol evaporates first, moves its way along the line arm, and reacts with the copper the whole way up. Reacts with the copper, flips back down. So there's a lot of that reflux, and reflux is very important. It's whenever the compounds are reacting with the copper, they start to create these esters, and eventually the copper will wear out and we'll need a new still. But the second part of the process is very important to us. We are the only worm tub condensers in Ireland as well. So worm tub condensation was the traditional way of condensing your distillate in Ireland as well, and it brings forth its own complexities. If we were, for example, to use straight line condensers, we would be able to draw off 1 litre a minute on our stills, but because we're using the worm tubs, we're only taking off 500 to 600 mil a minute. So essentially it's taking twice as long. But I can assure you the spirit that we're creating is much nicer as a result.
So it's condensing slower?
It's condensing much slower, and it adds a different character. It's a much more full body distillate, and it's got a tiny briny note in it as well, which I think ties in very well with the local grains that we're using that are grown down on the shores of Carniford Lough, for example, and also just that mountainous maritime environment that we've got here. So if you want to have a little look into the worm tub itself.
And the worm tub, the name comes from the spiral?
It comes from the serpentine spiral, let's say, yeah, the worm. So it used to be the worm was the most important part of distillation, for illicit distillation. Yes. And if you were caught with the worm, you would have been charged with possessing the components of a still. So whenever customs men, because up around this area was very famous for making poaching as well, the people would have got the worm and they would have hid it in the river, and the rest of the still can be easily composed together at a later date.
So what percentage of alcohol is it coming off the first still?
We tend, it takes around 30%, in and around that mark, sometimes higher, sometimes lower. Yeah. And we then collect that and when we pop it in our second still. So the second distillation is a very important process. So we make sure we take our time with it. We try to do it very slowly. We can't rush anything in the whiskey making process. And this still only needed to be a 500 litre in order to work with our 1,000 litre still. But we've actually got an 800 litre still, again with that same long neck. The reason why we've made it bigger is it would create more reflux with the copper again. Again, that reflux and creating esters is very important. So the steam works its way up through that long neck. You notice this time there's a much longer line arm. So that longer line arm creates a backlog in the still and encourages the reflux again.
So reflux, we're talking about more copper contact, which is a good thing for the spirit
exactly.
in terms of reaction with the copper.
It does, yeah. And you notice it coming off, creates more floral notes, more esters, and look at this once or twice at the start. We let it run quickly, and we just weren't able to use the spirit. It's just not worth it. You take your time with it and enjoy it. So again, it moves its way down through the condenser. That worm tub and it comes out and we collect it. At the minute you can see us collecting our heads and tails.
Yes.
So the cuts are very important to us as well. At Killowen, we always do our cuts by nose. You can use equipment, but it doesn't matter. We do it by nose because we're after flavour, you know. And the first bit that comes off, obviously it's methanol. You don't use it at all. The second bit, it's more like pear drops, a bit like acetone almost as well. And we cut it there, and the hearts is what we're after. And then the tails, you start smelling it. It's a bit more reminiscent of rubber boots and smelly feet. We don't want that in our distillate. So we're after the hearts, and it's all done by nose, as I say. But just so happens, it tends to be between 60 and 75%, and thereabouts. You know. So that's it.
Very good. So you cask here on site, and you have your own maturation?
We do indeed.
We can have a look at that
on site. We do a bit of malting on site, a bit of peating on site. We fill our own casks on site as well. So I suppose we can tour you around if you want to see it.
Please, great.
So because Irish whiskey's in its early days, and also because we like having fun, you know, we're not able to get our hands all the time on peated malts, you know, of oats, rye, wheat, and so we try to create our own. So we do a lot of malting here as well, and put those into our more experimental mash bills. Turf's very important to us as well, so we get some turf from the Mourne Mountains. We also get turf from Donegal, and two different types of turf that we find as well. Some are from higher up in the ground, some are further down. They both allow for different flavours. And in here we're doing a bit of smoking today.
So makeshift.
Smells beautiful. So
malting room, yes.
These had started to grow, and we took the heads and tails off them.
Oats
so
or barley?
This is oats at the minute, and we're now peating them at the minute. So.
And how long will they take to actually peat?
It's just however long. We tend to do it for the duration of a day. Once they're dried out, and we.
So they're not malted oats; they're oats that are just being.
No, we've malted as well.
Oh, you've malted them.
We basically soak them for a couple of days, and then we malt them here as well.
All right. Okay.
Until they start to get the shoots, you know. Just have to cut it off the right point.
Yeah.
So it's only a small amount. We also buy in some peated as well, but I think it just adds to the uniqueness, you know, and adds to the mash bill too. So.
I suppose the size of the distillery you can experiment a lot more with less repercussions.
We can indeed, and these are for the more specialist whiskies, you know, that will be releasing over the years, and even a small amount of peated sometimes in an unpeated potching, for example, a tiny amount of that just really adds to the complexity of the spirit. You mightn't notice it on your palate, but it just creates an extra layer of depth, you know.
So the potching you've released now, is that a peated element to it, or is it?
It actually is a very, very small peated element to it,
but
you can't taste it, you know. But the potching ourselves, it's something we're very proud of.
Yeah.
We think there's a lot of complexity to it, and we didn't release that potching to make money. In fact, we released that potching just to showcase the quality of our distillate at Killowen.
Yeah. And would that be very reflective of an old style potching?
I think so. In more recent history, potching makers started to use things like molasses, potatoes, even sugar beet while it was grown in Ireland for a while. But there was a lot of potching makers who stuck to the grain and stuck to the oats and stuck to the whatever they had, you know, grain wise. And I think grain, for us, is the key potching ingredient, you know.
Yeah, I think the myth around potatoes has been greatly exaggerated, you know.
I think so.
Potching, but
yeah.
Very good, very good. Let's go and have a look at your maturation. Right, Brendan, so we're in your maturation room here, and obviously you have a few casks around. Do you want to tell us what's going on in here?
Yeah, so I suppose we're the smallest distillery in Ireland, so this is also the smallest bonded store in Ireland, I think. So it's pretty small, so space is very important to us, and right now we've got 17 casks filled. Today was our 17th, and you can see here we're actually just put these planks down today, so we're going to start going up a level. So we can go 3 high, wouldn't go any more than 3 high. It's considered in the industry as being, you know, sort of unsafe. And we're just about to get an extension to our bond, which is going to be just down the street, so just down the laneway on the left hand side. So everything's still going to be very localised, you know, it's within stone's throw, but Yeah, most of our casks, well, about half of our casks, sorry, tend to be ex-bourbon, but a much bigger quantity. For example, here you can see a PX sherry cask,
Yes.
which is our first fill cask, KD001. It's important because it's a pot still, it's a peated pot still, and it's also got a non-GI mash bill. So to me it's a mash bill, to me it's a pot still, but to the industry it probably isn't.
So it doesn't conform to the 5%
exactly
rule.
But we still know it's superior quality whiskey. It's absolutely top notch. It's beautiful, it really is.
So that has contained Pedro Jimenez sherry,
It was fresh.
and then you've put in your own distillate now.
Exactly, yeah. So when I got that cask, there was still PX flushing about inside.
So is that the first one?
I decanted it, yeah, and I put it straight in.
Wow.
And the way it's just taken to the liquid has been perfect. So I think we're going to leave it for 3 years, see what happens.
Yeah.
If it's overpowered, we can bat it back with another peated cask of the same age.
Yeah.
It'll still be the same mash bill.
And is sourcing barrels something difficult?
There seems to be a great quality barrels out there. For example, we get these from Speyside, Cooperage in Scotland. Then our European casks, which I start talking about nowadays, they come from ASC barrels in France. So for example, here we've got our Pinot Noir cask, which is I think the spiciness you get from Pinot Noir complements really well with the spiciness you get from a pot still whiskey. Over here we've got Jamaican casks, a dark rum cask. We've got a tequila cask from Mexico. This one here is top secret. I don't want to tell anybody what it is. Even the staff don't know what it is, but we're very sure it's the only one of them in Ireland. So yeah, really looking forward to releasing it. All of these bar 3 are aging
Pot still?
pot still whiskey. 3 we have actually sourced some 10-year-old blend.
Okay.
As well as from neighbouring county, and we're looking forward to releasing it. So again, it's highly experimental too. It's crazy the colour and the flavour that that blend is extracting from the timber.
Neighbouring north or neighbouring south?
Neighbouring south, neighbouring southwest.
Very close, yeah. Okay.
But
so what's the ethos here behind what you're trying to do, Brendan? What is it? What's your philosophy?
I think it's not guesswork by any means. A lot of it's educated guesswork. It's about using your palate. For example, if you like a wine, you would take a piece of pipette of that drink and you would put it in with your distillate and you'd nose it and you would see that they do pair well together. It's also from doing a lot of industry research. A big part of my influence was whenever I was during the recession. I lived for a while in Australia and I spent some time in Tasmania with a distiller who I consider to be the best distiller in the world, Peter Bignell from Belgrove Distillery, and he used rye with Pinot Noir casks, and the pairing was absolutely perfect. And out of reference to the knowledge that Peter has given us and the support over the
and he's been here. Peter has been here.
He has indeed.
Helped as well in some form.
He did, yeah. And
advised.
He's always a good man to call if you have any queries, bounce ideas off, and he's very supportive. So over here, for example, we've got 2 Pinot Noir casks sitting on the bottom. They're quite large casks, and they're full of rye whiskey as well. So 100% lightly peated Irish rye. So this was the
100%
first
rye, yeah?
100%. No, sorry, not 100% rye. We had to use a little bit of malt.
Oh, yes, just to get it going.
Just to create a bed.
Yeah.
Because rye sticks together so much and it just clumps up at the bottom of our. So we tried it and it wouldn't work. So we had to use a little bit of malt that wasn't milled, and it just to create a better base on the bottom of our mash tun.
So it clogs up the more than oats even, does it?
It did, yeah. It sticks together. It drinks water, but it doesn't become suspended in water,
Yeah.
And so it's really difficult to work with, but the flavours are so rewarding, and you can understand why some people make what they call rye whiskies and they only have 30% rye. Whenever, it's so difficult. That's basically 100% rye, but we can't call it 100% rye because we're being honest. Some malt was used to create a base in the mash tun.
So is that important transparency? I mean, is that one of your built-in, to get back to a kind of standards that you're completely transparent in everything you're doing?
I think so. The way we released the patching, sort of trying to set the standard going forward, hit the mash bill at the back of the bottle, be completely honest with the customer.
Yeah.
Let them know what casks you used, how many years. If you buy a blend, tell them that you bought the blend. Say that we've bonded it here, we've used this cask, and only for X amount of weeks, X amount of months, and just be completely transparent, because people appreciate that. I like when they taste a whiskey and you can taste what they've done and they're telling you what they've done.
Yes.
You know, it's
something that's much needed in the industry now. Is a lot more. So you laid down your first cask when?
Yeah, about 6 months ago.
About 6 months ago, and you officially opened up about that time.
About 6 months and a week ago.
Yeah, very good.
And we hit the market there just a few weeks ago with our poaching and our gin, which is doing quite well locally. And now, what is it? The end of August.
Yeah.
Start of September, we're hoping to branch out now to Belfast and Dublin and see what happens. But the online response has been fantastic. You know, it seems to be a cult following out there of people who appreciate what we're doing and the ethos. There's a bit of solidarity out there in the industry, and it's been evident with our online sales for poachings.
Well, I'm looking forward to trying the poaching. I tried it a while ago, but just to see it now bottled to be interesting. So, I mean, can you tell us a little bit about how you want Killowen to be presented, and what's different about what Killowen do, and what your hopes are for the future?
For the future, just keep producing as much as possible. Win some bloody awards. Yeah. That would be a good one. But yeah, no, again, it's just those key, go over about transparency going forward. Just giving the customer what they want. I think the main reason why I started making whiskey is because I wanted to make whiskey that I couldn't find anywhere. Yes. So basically, it's revivalism as well for our native spirit. Yes. It's something that's very important to Irish culture. And it was a huge part of the world not so long ago, and it seems to have been forgotten. Irish whiskey fell out of fashion for a number of reasons, and there's no excuses why we're not making it the way it was made now today. Yes. So yeah, it's about revivalism and transparency.
And how do you see the technical file? Do you think there is a revision required in order to accommodate a few more traditional pot stills?
I think the powers that be are there to protect Irish whiskey, and there's a lot of common sense among people, and I think they are going to make the right decisions, and they're going to change the GI so that people will be allowed to use. People are allowed to use more of the other 5% other grains, and just keep it in line with what was done historically. Yes. Not just what's misinterpreted as tradition. Tradition was history, and you know what I mean. There's been fantastic pot still made for the last 50 years in Ireland, but I think it's time now as well to revert back and maybe make it in different ways. Not just to revert back, maybe to look forward and try things that have never been tried before. Of course, no, I did, right. That's very well put. Make things, Well, look, Brendan, thank you very much for showing us around. Really appreciate it. Looking forward to trying some of the spirit now. And definitely, we can crack on there. Might as well try it. We may as well.